Hello, you are listening to A Woman's Guide, Episode 5. Have you allowed shame to rule your life? Do you see yourself free from it? How do you cut the cords of shame that bind you? Today's episode is How to Overcome Defining Yourself by Shame. Stay tuned. This is A Woman's Guide to Reclaiming Wholeness After Sexual Abuse. For all of you listening, welcome to the show. I am Simone, your confidant and guide. Thank you for tuning in. Okay, so we've all experienced shame at one time or the other, of course. And to feel shame, if you don't know, is to feel humiliated or embarrassed. And of course, this can encompass other feelings such as guilt or regret, as well as other feelings like feelings of unworthiness and inferiority. Okay? And that usually can result, this feeling of shame can be from a past mistake or a perceived fault or a perceived mistake. Shame, I think, is probably one of the darkest feelings that we can have. It's very dark, it's very dank, it's very painful. Shame is a very painful emotion. For the majority of us, I think, we subject ourselves unnecessarily to shame. Okay? And we experience it excessively and frequently. And this is because it's most likely unwarranted shame. Unwarranted shame means that you did not do anything. Whatever you did not warrant that level of shame that you are subjecting yourself through. And that is very damaging and toxic, especially if you're having this dark, deep feeling of shame daily. You just have this dark cloud hanging over your head every day. That's damaging. And that is the absolute source of unhappiness. Excessive shame is very damaging to our lives. And the reason why I would say that is because it prevents us from living fully. You cannot live fully if you are feeling unworthy or having feelings of inferiority or feeling humiliated all the time. It prevents you from engaging totally in life, in relationships, within the present moment. It can stop you from accomplishing your goals and your dreams, your desires, going after anything in life, because why? You don't feel worthy. It prevents us from accepting the love that we deserve, love that we so desperately need and that we thrive on. We live on love. But it will cause you to block that love because you don't feel worthy of it. It will cause you to avoid help because you don't feel worthy of receiving help from other people. It prevents us from expressing ourselves unapologetically and with power because we don't like who we are. We feel inferior. So, and it also, as a result of that, it prevents us from shining and living in our greatness, demonstrating our greatness, showing our greatness to the world. It obviously, and this is the most important, this is the main point, it prevents us from loving ourselves at all. We cannot love ourselves if we're hanging on to shame or we're submerged in shame. And with that said, because we are so So we're so embarrassed and we feel so inferior and unworthy, and we do not love ourselves, and we cannot find ways of loving ourselves with the shame still inside of us. We sabotage opportunities. So, as you can see by that really long, I would say, example of what shame can do for us, or shame can do to us, and how it can affect our lives, you can see that it's very important that this needs to be reversed, or it needs to be dispelled. Let's put it that way, because it will just negatively affect your life all the way around. It doesn't matter what you're trying to do or who you are, where you live. If you are carrying toxic amounts of shame, and I mean there's different levels, but if you carry it at all within your psyche, within your subconscious mind, it doesn't matter if it's at the forefront and you feel it every day and you just feel this dark cloud following you around everywhere, or you just have it, you don't even realize that you have shame. It's on a subconscious level. It's in the back of your mind playing. It's still going to affect you the same way. It doesn't matter. Okay? Shame needs to be uprooted. It needs to be dispelled. It needs to go, because nothing else can come in until it's gone. It blocks everything out. You need to dispel it so you can live a happy, full life. So you can develop any kind of good, healthy relationship with yourself as well as other people. And of course, I would say that it is an everyday battle or a struggle and a hindrance for someone, all the more of a hindrance and a struggle for someone who has gone through abuse. Because abuse, that is one of the biggest effects of abuse, is to feel shame and to feel unworthy and inferior. And of course, this is about sexual abuse, so we have to speak about that. Sexual abuse does cause shame. Absolutely. That is a common thread I see with sexual abuse, is shame. It's just shame. Shame and guilt and rage and other things like that, but shame is a main one. It's massive. So definitely, if you do not deal with it, especially if you're a victim of shame or victim of sexual abuse, it will really destroy your life. It will destroy your life. And it can last a lifetime if you don't deal with it. If you don't deal with it, if you don't dispel it, if you don't take it out, it will destroy your life. It is all the more tragic when the shame is unwarranted, because the victim, the person who's gone through the abuse, is not the one at fault. Okay, so they did nothing to warrant that kind of, they did absolutely nothing to warrant that kind of shame. It's quite the contrary. They are the ones that are not at fault, and the perpetrator or the offender is the one that has the shame, or should have the shame. And most likely they do have the shame. That's how they acted out their own shameful feelings, by, putting shame on someone else. Okay? Shame and guilt happens because the victim feels like it's their fault. They did something bad. And of course they didn't. This is the root of guilt and shame. This is the root. The root is feeling I did something wrong. And that's why I feel unworthy. That's why I feel inferior. That's why I feel humiliated and embarrassed. And specifically for someone who has gone through abuse, it most likely happened in their childhood. And with that said, children usually are the ones to feel like everything is their fault. They're just wired that way. Their brains are wired that way. They think that no matter what the circumstance is, no matter what happened, no matter how they were involved, that child was involved, whoever's in pain, and if they're in pain or if they get abused or whatever, they believe that it's their fault. They're the ones that caused it. It's my fault. You ever hear kids saying, oh, it's my fault that mommy and daddy broke up? Or it's my fault that mommy, drinks all the time. It's my fault that daddy takes drugs or whatever. You see, children always feel like everything is their fault. It has nothing to do with them, but they feel that way. And as you grow up, that childlike mentality from that trauma, it stays with you. So even when you get older, you still have that imprint in your mind about, oh, it's my fault. It's my fault. It's also good to mention, too, that especially if this child was being abused, that they were told to keep their abuse a secret. Or they were told to keep the abuse a secret. So, of course, children are not stupid. I mean, their brains are not developed as much as an older person's brain is, but they have a sense that something is wrong. They already know. With this abuse, this is where the shame comes in, because they know something is wrong, but they point it to themselves and say that I'm the one who caused this. So if they were told to keep a secret, and they have an understanding that what's happening is wrong, and they believe that they're at fault for what is wrong, because that's just how they're wired, therefore they're compounded with more shame because they feel like it's their fault. They feel like it's their fault. They know it's their fault. Or they feel like it's their fault, sorry. Something bad is happening. It's their fault. And then the person says to keep it a secret. And children do not like secrets. I realize that. A lot of children do not like to keep secrets. Okay? Children are very vocal. They're very honest, if you notice that. If you're around any children or you have children, you notice that they'll tell you the truth. They don't have a filter. They just have a way of telling you the truth. So if you're going to tell a child to keep a secret, that's going to mess them up even more. That shame is going to become so compounded and heavy because they know that something is wrong already. They feel because something is wrong already, it's their fault. And not only that, they're told to keep a secret. That's going to bring even more shame. So they can't tell daddy, or they can't tell mommy, or they can't tell whoever, because I'm at fault. And now I have to keep a secret, which goes against their nature. They don't like to keep secrets. Children are told to keep secrets. Children are taught to keep secrets. But I believe that they do not like to keep secrets. And it makes it even worse if they're threatened. Or if someone else in their family or someone that they love is threatened because they're being abused. And that perpetrator doesn't want them to be telling anybody. So they try to shut them up. No, if they do shut them up by saying, I'm going to hurt someone in your family. So can you imagine all of that shame being layered on and compounded in? That's why sexual abuse has so much shame attached to it. Because it's all of these different variables. Not really variables, but it's all these different aspects and these different things that's going on emotionally and physically and morally. And, what would somebody's going to think that I'm disgusting by going through this, and, oh, this is my fault. And this person wants me to keep it a secret even though I feel disgusted about it, and I can't say anything because so-and-so may get hurt. Can you imagine that? That's why sexual abuse has so much shame. It's just compounded shame. Shame compounded. And it makes it even worse. I'm not going to say it makes it even worse, because if it's done once or 50 times, it does not matter. It's the same impact. Doesn't matter. But my goodness, if that is something that is prolonged, It's something that happens a lot. Mm, like, it's just, I don't know. I don't know. I really don't know scientifically. I don't really know if it creates more damage the more it's being done, or just develops a deeper pathology. I don't know. I don't know. Because your brain develops patterns through these experiences and through these traumas. So yes, I would say that the longer it's being done, the more it's being done, the deeper the pathology, the deeper the belief about self, the deeper and the darker and the heavier you're going to have shame, because it's happening over and over and over again. It's just a cycle. It's a cycle. It just keeps cycling. It's not something that stops quickly. It just keeps, becoming more and more ingrained in your mind. And that's how these people develop pathologies and disorders. It screws their mind up. But not to say that one time cannot screw your mind up just as bad. It does not matter. Trauma is trauma. But it's just, I just believe that the more you do things, the more it's going to get worse. It's just going to keep getting worse. I can say that on my end, because what happened with me was not a one-time thing. It happened over time, and it happened more than once, and it got worse and worse and worse. And I think that's how I got worse and worse and worse, because it was just damaging my mind as it went along, right? So absolutely, I think that, shame is the biggest thing that comes from sexual abuse, but it comes from physical abuse too. It comes from emotional abuse, verbal abuse. Yes, absolutely. When someone is calling you names, or causing you to feel bad about yourself, criticizing you, berating you, yelling and screaming at you, causing you to feel less than, causing you to feel, question your worth and yourself, yeah, that's very damaging, of course. Neglect and abandonment can cause a lot of shame too. You know, I can relate to those other things too. I can relate to those other things. So I know that, abuse in general is going to cause some shame, for sure. So when we carry on these feelings of shame or guilt, or feelings of wrongness or unworthiness for so long, it gets imprinted into our minds. It becomes imprinted into our minds. That stuff plays in the background of your mind. It does. Your subconscious mind carries everything that you've ever seen, everything that you've ever done, everything. It records everything. So believe me, that trauma is in your mind, and it's replaying itself. It's replaying. It's in your mind. It's alive there. It doesn't go away. Your subconscious holds everything. So that's going to be playing in your mind over and over again, that trauma, over and over and over again. And the longer you go, the longer you go with, not dealing with the root of that shame, and it just keeps playing in your mind year after year. It's very powerful. And then you start to identify with it. You identify with it. You identify with that shame. And what I mean by that is we start to think that we are the shame, that it's a part of us, that it is us, that it's like it's who we are. It's like our identity. We are the shame. Isn't that crazy? That's crazy. For example, like, you start to say to yourself, well, you just start feeling in yourself that I'm wrong. That's shame. When something's playing in your mind and it's like, I'm wrong. I'm wrong. There's something wrong with me. There's something wrong with me. That's shame. That's feelings of unworthiness. That's inferior. I'm wrong. That's an expression. That's a language of shame. That is shame speaking. We believe what the shame tells us. We believe the shame, what the shame labels us as and tells us what we are and what to feel. Okay? Any language, action, behavior, labels, names, painful emotions that come from shame, we take on those distortions. You see, when we have a feeling and a thought, when we have a thought about ourselves, it manifests in all different kinds of ways, okay? So then we have a language. Shame has a language. So if we have shame imprinted into our mind, we're going to speak the language of shame. We're going to act shame. We're going to call ourselves names. We're going to constantly be feeling those painful emotions. It takes on a life of its own, you know. It really does. If you do not reverse it. It's like contamination. It's like a contamination. If you have a glass of water and then you put in some kind of toxic substance and then it contaminates. It just contaminates. It doesn't matter how little or a lot you put in there, you contaminated the water. Okay? It's still water, but it's contaminated with this substance. And yes, you can actually filter and purify that water, just like you can do that with your mind. You can do that. But I just use that example to say that that's what shame is like. It's like a drop of some kind of toxicity, toxic waste or toxic whatever, and then it turns the whole water toxic. So it turns your mind toxic. It turns your thoughts and your emotions and your words and your behaviors toxic. Because it affects everything. So you got to dispel it. We have to dispel it. Because it contaminates your brain. It contaminates the way you think. It then contaminates your thoughts of self. And then it contaminates your life. All aspects of your life. Your relationships. Shame, I'm telling you, I've dealt with so much shame. Because I remember that when I used to walk down the street, I used to look at the pavement. Every time someone would come walking in my direction, I would have to look at the pavement because I was afraid. I couldn't look people in the eyes because I was ashamed. You understand? Every time people would look at me, I'd feel shame. Every time I would be happy and other people would see it, I'd feel shame. When I would make a mistake, any kind of mistake, it doesn't matter what it is, and someone would correct me, I'd feel shame. Even if they didn't correct me. If I made a mistake by myself, I'd feel shame. I'd feel shame about the way I sounded, the way I looked, the way I behaved. I'd feel shame from anything. Anything. Like literally, it was anything. I dealt with a lot of shame, so I'm telling you. Shame, it causes you to sabotage yourself. It causes you to sabotage yourself. Sabotage your progress. Sabotage your opportunities. Sabotage anything that you could potentially do because you just have this toxic belief that I'm not worthy and I'm inferior. I'm not good enough. This is what we believe when we are feeling so much feelings of shame. Shame needs to be dispelled before you can, have anything come inside of your thoughts and your emotions and feelings, because it just takes up all the room. It just takes up all the room. And all you feel is shame. Shame and guilt, But I chose to speak more about shame because shame encompasses guilt too. You can feel guilt while you're feeling shame. Okay, so I'm just going to give you a few ways to combat shame or to reverse the shame that you feel. The first point is forgive the past as well as yourself. And I'll clarify why I say yourself as well. You have to forgive the past. And I'll say why you need to forgive the past. You forgive the past. Well, first of all, let me say what forgiveness is. Forgiveness is to release something. It's to let something go. It's to let go. It's to release something. Okay? But I'll tell you how to forgive too. You forgive, you release what was, how it was, what happened, everything about where that shame came from. You have to release it and let it go. And that's not easy. My goodness. I mean, I'm not saying you're just going to do that in a day. And it's something that painful, it's not going to take you a day to just forgive, okay? But you have to understand that what is done is done. It's finished. It's over. Okay? It will never happen again. It cannot be changed. It cannot be changed. It's done. It's over. It's the past. The past is called the past for a reason. It's finished. You have to forgive the past in order to rid yourself of shame. Because that shame came from somewhere. It came from some kind of experience or what someone said. That shame came from somewhere. You were not born with shame. You did not come out of the womb feeling shameful. Something happened to cause you to feel shame. So you have to rid yourself of that experience, or actually learn from it, but cut yourself off of that experience by forgiveness. You have to forgive yourself for believing that you could have done anything about it. That's what I mean about forgiveness. Because we're not speaking about forgiveness that whatever you did warranted that shame and that you are at fault. No. We're speaking about forgiveness for self, for believing that you could have done anything about it. So you're going to forgive yourself in the moment right now about thinking that you could have done anything about what you went through. You couldn't have done anything about it. Okay? You couldn't have done anything about it. And what I mean by that is, because of course things could have happened differently, but what I'm saying is, it happened that way because it just happened that way. You couldn't have done anything about it. You have to forgive yourself for thinking that you could have done anything about it. You were a child. You got to forgive yourself, because I know we sit there and we think at times, oh, only if I did this, and only if I said this to so-and-so, and why didn't I do this? And listen, that is going to torture you. Because I've done that to myself. I sat there and said to myself, why didn't I do this? Why didn't I do that? Why didn't I know better? You were a child. You were not at fault. You're faultless. You're innocent. You have to forgive. You got to forgive yourself. You got to forgive yourself for thinking that it could have been different. Forgive yourself right now for thinking that things could have been different. That's very important. That's very important. Because the more we hold on to this regret, which is also shame, which comes from shame, as we hold on to this regret and thinking that things could have been different, oh, I should have done this, I should have done that, you're just going to keep holding on to that shame. We have to cut the cord. So you have to forgive. You have to forgive your past and forgive yourself. Forgive yourself for thinking you did anything wrong. Forgive yourself for thinking you did anything wrong, because you did not do anything wrong. Okay? You forgive yourself for thinking you did anything wrong, for thinking that you were at fault. This is where the shame is coming from, remember? You have to forgive yourself for thinking you did anything wrong. When you forgive, you wipe the slate clean. You wipe it clean. When you wipe the slate clean, you can start afresh. You can put that in the past. You can leave that in the past and say, okay, that happened. It happened the way it did. It happened with whom it did. It happened where it did. It just happened. It's done. It's over. It has nothing to do with who I am now. Nothing to do with it. It never had anything to do with who you were anyway, in the first place. You're not what you experienced. It has nothing to do with you as a person. But you have to cut off the shame by forgiving the past and forgiving yourself for thinking that you did something wrong, or you did something to cause that, or you caused it on yourself. No, 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 no. You have to forgive yourself. And the way that you forgive yourself is you have to use positive affirmations. You have to use affirmations. You have to say things to yourself. Positive affirmations create, if you want, but it's not necessarily create, but it's creating that in your mind. It's creating that belief in your mind. Because you remember, your mind is thinking something negative about yourself. So you have to use positive affirmations to create and reinforce a new belief. Because that's how you got beliefs in the first place. Negative beliefs in the first place. It was something that was impressed on your mind over and over and over again. Maybe not over and over and over and over again sometimes, but because you're a child, you're so impressionable. Things just went right into your brain. You know, you're a sponge. You just suck it up. So you have to reverse what it is that is destructive, or something that is maladaptive, and create a new thought. Create a new thought. And then when you create a new thought and you keep saying these things over and over again, and you keep having more and more new thoughts of that kind, you're going to develop a new belief pattern about yourself. It works. I'm telling you, it works. It takes time, though. And you have to say it often. But you have to, positive affirmations, anything that you want to say positive to yourself, or you use it to forgive the past, whatever you want to do with it. But it's about creating a new thought pattern in your mind. Because we're reversing it, right? We have to reverse it, so we have to create something. So it could be a quote, it could be a phrase, it could be a statement that is repeated daily or said daily. I would say daily. Say it 3 times a day, 4 times a day, every day. The more you say it, the more you believe it. Remember, you believe it because you're saying it over and over again. That's how your brain operates. It needs information to be pressed into it. So it could be like, I forgive myself for thinking I did anything wrong. That's an affirmation. I forgive myself for thinking that I was ever worthless. That's an affirmation. I am perfect. That's an affirmation. I am worthy. That's an affirmation. Anything you want to change. Anything you want to change. I have no shame. I love myself. I feel good about myself. Everything is well now. All is well now. You could even say that to cause, to make yourself feel more safe now. Use positive affirmations. And do it often. Do it often. Don't ever underestimate the power of words being impressed on your mind. The power of words are very powerful. With that said, to the next point, watch the words you use to describe yourself. Because we're trying to eliminate shame here. Watch the words that you use to describe yourself. Be aware of what you're saying to yourself. Be aware of what you're saying to yourself. Because like I said, shame has a language. It has a language. It has a speech. It has a feeling. It has a thought, okay? So if you're speaking out what shame is saying to you, what's going to happen if you continue to use those words or that language? Well, you're just going to reinforce what it is that you already feel about yourself, and you're just making it worse. You're just creating more shame for yourself. Don't use the language of shame. Watch what you're saying to yourself. When you're saying, oh, I'm trash, or I'm no good, or I'm wrong, or no one loves me, or something like that. Something that has to do with shame. Feeling unworthy. You're just going to reinforce that. So instead, you have to use healthier and uplifting truer statements about you, you must do that and use the positive affirmations, as I said. So watch the words that you use to describe yourself. I'm telling you, it's so powerful. And when you say this to yourself, you're listening to yourself say this. Do you know how powerful that is? Your mouth is not that far away from your ear. It's right there. It's going to go straight into your ear. So be careful. And that's another thing that I struggled with, because I used to say so many things to myself. Bad things to myself. You know, I used to just have this, mantra in my mind saying that I am wrong, I am wrong, I am wrong, I am wrong. And I guess that's the reason why whenever I made mistakes, I felt so ashamed. You see the connection? Because that made me wrong. That made me feel more wrong. Because that's how I felt already. So I felt more wrong by making a mistake. That was my feelings. So I was ashamed. I did not like criticizing or criticisms. I didn't like when someone corrected me. I didn't like feeling wrong because I already felt wrong about myself. And I used to call myself names. I used to say things to myself like, "Oh, you're so stupid. Oh, you're an idiot. Oh, who the hell's gonna want me?" Or I don't know. I used to say so many things to myself. Who's gonna want me? Or I'm so ugly. I'm so this. I'm so. I mean, that's not just conducive just to shame. I mean, that's just saying things because you have low self-esteem. But any shame language, feelings, or words of unworthiness or inferiority, being embarrassed of yourself, saying things out of embarrassment about yourself, that's shame. That's shame. So watch what you're saying. Also, this is another thing too. Watch and avoid the behaviors, certain behaviors that trigger shame. So what I mean is, when you're doing a certain thing, we have a certain activity that we all do that maybe we don't necessarily like, okay? But in this case, you do a behavior, you do an activity, you do something that is going to make you feel bad about yourself afterwards. It's just going to trigger shame for you. And like I said, with the mind, it's like it's so cyclical. It's so like we do things even though we know it's like a pathology. Yeah, pathology. It's a maladaptive behavior because we're doing things that we know is not good, but we keep doing it. And it creates more of that feeling. And then we do it again and it creates more of that feeling. It's crazy. So when you do a certain behavior and it triggers shame, you feel shame. You feel worse about yourself, right? You just get this upheaval of emotions, upheaval of shame. But then you do it again. You do it again. So, and most likely, when you have that upheaval of shame, it's attached to that experience that's when the shame started to happen, right? It's a trigger. It's a trigger to a certain time or period in your life where you had that shame, right? Your mind makes these associations. So stop doing things that will cause you to feel more shame, because you have to recover. So try not to do things. And I know, I mean, if you had a lot of shame like me, where everything I did I was ashamed, like everything I did, okay, that's impossible. You will not do anything. You'll not go anywhere. You'll not see anyone. But I'm saying those behaviors that will cause an upheaval of shame for you. Just deep, dark feelings of shame, because you have to heal it. You got to heal it. So stop doing things that are going to create more shame for you, and it's going to cause you to feel shame about creating more shame for you. It's a cycle. So, for example, I wonder if I can give you an example. Just something that, everyone has their own specific trigger. Everyone has their own triggers. But if you do certain things, like, okay, for example, This is just an example. I don't know, okay? Um, let's say if you sleep with someone on the first date, and that creates a lot of shame for you. Okay? You know that if you're going to sleep with someone that you barely know, and most likely because it's attached to the fact that you are experiencing sexual abuse, you immediately are triggered to that time where you're abused, and because you sleep with someone for the first time, it feels like you're being abused again, and it creates shame, or it triggers shame within you. Stop doing that. That's what I mean. Don't do that. You don't do things that you know is going to trigger shame for you. Because as you continue to keep doing things that create more and more shame for you, you're just compounding more shame. You're creating more shame. You're not going to heal it. So you have to heal it and stop doing things that are going to trigger you. Because as you continue to trigger yourself over and over and over and over again, you're going to start feeling depressed. This is where, you're going to start feeling depressed. You're going to get deeper and deeper into this. So stop doing that. Don't do things that you know are going to hurt you, or they're going to make you feel more shame. Because we're trying to get rid of it. We're trying to get rid of it here. You got to be gentle with yourself. You have to be gentle with yourself. You have to watch what you do. As you recover, you got to watch what you do. You got to be observant. You got to figure out what makes you fall back into depression, or fall back into feelings of shame. You got to watch that. You must watch that. And you got to observe that. Because it's about being good to you, okay? So, as you practice, just reversing shame, you just need to know that it's a process. Okay? It takes time to unlearn this. It takes time to learn and to reverse those patterns. So you must have patience with yourself. You must have patience with yourself. Okay? So that was quite short, but that's it for today. And thank you for listening to A Woman's Guide to Reclaiming Wholeness After Sexual Abuse. If you like what you heard, please rate and review on iTunes. Next week, we will explore how to overcome defining yourself by feelings of inferiority. So be sure to tune in. Until next time, take care.